Long ago, before the stars had names, and before rivers carved the shapes of kingdoms, there was only the hush of wind over plains, and the soft glimmer of the moon over silent soil. And in that endless quiet of time, where sleep and story blend, we drift backward into the land known as Mesopotamia, the cradle between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, where the dreams of early humankind began to take form, not as bursts of noise or battles of kings, but as slow ripples in the water, as reeds bending softly in the breeze, and as footsteps pressing gently into fertile clay beside cool riverbanks. And it is here, in this wide and whispering land, that the first people gathered, not in war or ceremony, but in the simplest act of noticing that the waters rose and fell, that seeds left in the mud would one day grow, and that shelters made of straw could be shaped to face the sun. And so, the first villages emerged not with grandeur, but with rhythm. Rhythms of seasons of harvests, of daydreams beneath the tamarisk trees. And slowly, like the breath of someone falling asleep, the world began to change. As clay tablets held the marks of thought and stories were pressed into permanence, and those stories told of Enki and Inanna, and the great flood, and the seven sages, and a city built of dreams called Eridu, whispered to be the first. A city born not from stone, but from silence and soft devotion, where gods walked with mortals, and the sky hung low with wonder. And as Eridu rose, so too did Uruk, the city of writing, the city of myth, where King Gilgamesh, part man, part divine, once wandered through temples and gardens in search of immortality, his footsteps echoing in cuneiform. And the people of Sumer, gentle and clever, crafted temples called ziggurats that reached toward heaven, not with haste, but with reverence, brick upon brick like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. And the night skies above these temples twinkled with the early maps of stars, their positions noted in quiet awe by priests who watched the heavens not for conquest, but for calm. And as centuries passed like drifting clouds, the language of Sumer gave way to the tongue of Akkad, and a new chapter unfolded as Sargon of Akkad, wrapped in the dream of empire, gathered cities not with cruelty, but with a vision of unity, a river of peoples brought together beneath the same sun. And though battles came and went, it is not the sword we hear in this dream, but the slow chiseling of laws, the shaping of time, the measurement of land, and the songs sung in the great temples to gods whose names were spoken like lullabies. Anu, Enlil, Ishtar, Shamash, each a whisper in the desert wind. And as Akkad gave way to Babylon, the dream deepened, for Babylon was a city of gardens and laws, of brick walls stretching wide beneath the stars. And it is here that Hammurabi gently unrolled his stele, covered in careful laws not to punish, but to bring order, a kind of stillness to human affairs, so that even as the world turned, the people might sleep knowing what was fair. And beside these laws, in cool courtyards, scholars traced the paths of planets and merchants weighed silver on balanced scales, and lovers met beneath palm trees, their secrets buried in the soft rustle of leaves. And when the Babylonians looked to the skies, they did not fear the stars. They read them, calmly, slowly, noting when Venus would return, when Mars would burn red, when the moon would vanish and return again. And through it all, the rivers continued to flow, patient and eternal, carrying silt and memory through the cities of Ur, Lagash, Nippur, and Kish, each name a soft bell in the distance of time, ringing faintly as you drift deeper into rest. And in Assyria, where stone lions guarded the palaces, the scribes still sat with steluses in hand, pressing dreams into clay, documenting not just war, but poetry, omens, lists of birds, and the cries of newborns. And even as empires shifted like dunes in wind, there remained always the same quiet longing to understand, to preserve, to wonder. And so Mesopotamia, land between rivers, land of firsts, land of gentle awakenings, continues on, unbroken in its hum, through the rise of Nineveh and the voice of Ashurbanipal, who gathered the tablets of the world into a great library so that nothing would be lost. And even though time passed and ruins fell quiet and reeds grew where kings once walked, the memory never died. It only softened, like a story told slowly in the dark, fading into the hush of night and the lullaby of history, where gods, scribes, and shepherds all rest beside each other, beneath the same stars, still watching, still dreaming, still waiting to be remembered. As the slow winds drifted over the mud-brick rooftops of Babylon and the incense smoke curled lazily in temple courtyards, time itself seemed to settle like golden dust upon the world, and life moved in rhythm with the rivers and the sky. Each dawn a soft repetition of the last, and each night a mirror of dreams long remembered, for the people of Mesopotamia lived not in haste but in harmony, their world a gentle weave of earth and heaven. And so the scribes sat beneath shaded porticos, their eyes half-lidded in the heat, inscribing not only lists of grain and taxes, but lullabies, prayers, fables, and quiet questions about the stars. And each mark pressed into wet clay was a whisper into time, a lull into forever, as if each tablet were a stone in the long road of memory. And beside these scribes, potters shaped bowls with steady hands, not for palaces or wealth, but for daily bread, for oil, for sharing. And shepherds hummed to their flocks across hills baked in soft amber light, and the songs they sang carried through centuries like the call of doves. And though kings ruled and armies marched, they are but shadows now, softened by sleep and dust, their names little more than murmurs beneath the wind. And what remains instead is the stillness of gardens, where dates grew heavy on bending branches, and the hush of markets where women bartered for fish and herbs and fabrics dyed in lapis blue, and the great ziggurats, those massive temples shaped like stairways to the sky, rose above the cities not as monuments to power, but as gentle hands reaching upward, seeking meaning. Their bricks cooled in twilight as priests whispered hymns into the dusk. And below them, in shadowed alleys and shaded groves, children played with toy carts and little clay animals, their laughter brief but eternal, like sparks drifting upward before fading into sky. And as the world turned slowly on its axis, Mesopotamia watched without hurry, content to breathe, to record, to dream, and in doing so became the gentle heart of civilization, a place where the days were measured in sunlight and the nights in stars. And the memory of it all lingers, even now, like the final notes of a long-forgotten lullaby. In the slow unfolding of centuries, the people of Mesopotamia came to understand time not only as a passage of days and nights, but as a sacred rhythm shaped by the moon. The planting of barley, the rising of the rivers, and the soft repetition of holy festivals that marked the turning of each season. And so they built calendars not from numbers alone, but from the feel of warm soil underfoot, the return of migrating birds, the swelling of fruit on vines, and in their temples they offered cakes and incense and song to thank the gods who moved unseen through wind and water and sky. gods who bore many names. Anu in the heavens, Enlil in the wind, Ea in the deep, Ishtar of love and war, and Shamash, god of the golden sun, who watched over justice like a candle in the dark. And beneath these names were older names, forgotten names, the ancient breath of beliefs that had no form but lived in gesture, in ritual, in quiet acts passed down across lifetimes. And as their world grew more complex, so too did their records, their cities, their ideas, until the plain between the rivers was a tapestry of temples, canals, workshops, and homes, each place humming softly with the life of its people. Farmers who coaxed wheat from salty earth, brewers who stirred barley into slow simmering vats of beer, midwives who spoke gently to the newborn as they arrived in low-lit rooms, traders who led donkeys across long sunlit roads toward the coasts, their backs heavy with lapis, copper, wool, and fragrant resin, and every step, every task, every breath became part of something larger, a patient echo through time. And even the storms that rolled in from the east or the floods that broke through the dikes were not feared so much as read, understood, interpreted through tablets and omens, signs from the gods, reminders of balance. And so the scribes kept their pens ready, and the priests offered their chants, and the ordinary people kept walking, sewing, baking, weaving, watching the world not as something to conquer, but something to follow like a gentle river's bend. And through this rhythm, through this quiet trust in the cycles of sky and soil, Mesopotamia endured not as a single empire or king, but as a long breath of human presence, spoken softly through clay and wind and water, never hurried, never lost, only remembered in silence. And though many names once echoed through the halls of kings, Sargon of Akkad, Rimush, Naram-Sin, rulers whose sandals touched the stone floors of palaces now buried beneath centuries of earth, their memory lies not in their battles, but in the subtle shapes they left behind. The weight of a measure, the curve of a wall, the organization of a city where avenues ran straight and water flowed through channels dug with care. And even the rise of empire in these lands felt less like a shout and more like a ripple, as Sargon's Akkadian language slowly merged with the Sumerian tongue and the scribes adapted, learned, blended, carving both languages into the same tablets as though language itself were clay to be shaped. And the stories that once belonged to one people now belong to all, tales of creation, of gods forming humans from mud and blood, of floods that swept across the world, of birds sent out to find dry land, of wisdom hidden beneath the waves. And as these stories were shared, carried on wind and caravan, the world became more connected, though the people still moved slowly, still looked to the same stars, still listened to the same hush of reeds along the riverbank. And when the Akkadian dynasty faded like footprints in dry earth, it did not fall in violence alone, but in forgetting, in the slow ebb of harvests, the drift of power to new cities like Ur, where kings such as Ur-Nammu and Shulgi built great walls, not just of defense, but of pride and patience. And as the third dynasty of Ur blossomed like a quiet rose, its beauty was not in conquest, but in bureaucracy, in the gentle organization of society, the writing of laws, the careful weighing of tribute and labor. And in this system, there was a deep calm, for everything had its place. Each worker, each priestess, each ox and chisel and beam of cedar from far-off Lebanon. And the night skies above these cities were not silent, but filled with dreams, For in the stillness of the ziggurat's shadow, astronomers traced the movement of Jupiter and Saturn, their findings whispered into the wind, stored in tablets buried for thousands of years beneath the dust, waiting for rediscovery, waiting for someone to listen. And still, as centuries passed, like slow-moving clouds, Mesopotamia continued to breathe beneath the stars. And while dynasties rose and fell like gentle waves upon the shore of time, the people endured, sowing their fields, shaping their pots, lifting their eyes to the glowing constellations. And so it was that even when the great cities of Ur and Uruk quieted beneath the weight of time, other cities stirred, Isin, Lhasa, Eshnunna, each one humming with its own quiet rhythms, their temples dedicated, their streets warmed by the morning sun. And each time a new king emerged claiming power, he did so with ceremony, with offerings, with the silent hope that his rule might stretch like the river itself, steady and nourishing. And among these rulers, Hammurabi of Babylon emerged not with thunder, but with balance, his voice preserved in stone, his laws carved in calm detail, so that all who read them, be they farmer, merchant, or servant, could know their place, their rights, their responsibilities. And in this fairness there was peace, a kind of order that soothed the worries of those who worked the fields and drew water from wells. And Babylon flourished, its gardens lush, its streets alive with trade, and the very name of the city shimmered with meaning, Gate of the Gods, as though each sunrise opened a portal to something sacred. And while the outer world shifted and kingdoms changed hands, the people of Mesopotamia returned again and again to the steady rituals of life. The tending of sheep, the grinding of grain, the lighting of oil lamps at twilight. And these small acts, repeated endlessly, became the true history of the land. Not the wars, not the crowns, but the daily gestures of millions layered softly atop one another, like sediment in the riverbed, quiet, enduring, eternal. Even as invaders arrived from the north and east, tribes with different tongues, new customs, new gods, they did not erase what was already there, but instead folded themselves into the fabric of Mesopotamia, learning its scripts, its measures, its customs. And in time, the Kassites, the Hurrians, and others who came did not destroy the old world, but became part of its dream. And so Babylon lived on, not as a fortress, but as an idea, as a gentle persistence of language, ritual, and memory. And even as temples crumbled and dynasties disappeared, the stories endured, carried in the mouths of mothers, recited by priests, etched into bricks and tablets, stored in cool archives underground. And it was through these stories that Mesopotamia remembered itself, not in the shout of victory, but in the quiet hum of continuity. For the land between rivers had always been a land of return, of rebirth. And though the Assyrians to the north would rise in power with fierce stone lions and walls high as hills, they too carried the same thread, the same reverence for words and signs. And in Nineveh, under the watch of King Ashurbanipal, the greatest library of the ancient world was gathered, not to boast, not to conquer, but to preserve, to collect every whisper of wisdom from across the lands. And so, the myths, the rituals, the science, the prayers, the medicine, the dreams, all of it was brought together beneath stone and cedar, waiting in the quiet like seeds pressed into the earth, waiting for a future to remember them. And the scribes in that library did not rush, did not shout. They copied in silence, line by line, like gentle breaths in the dark, preserving Mesopotamia's soul with every stroke. And as Nineveh glowed with the golden light of its final glory, the winds of change again began to stir. And from the southern plains, Babylon returned, reborn under new kings, new hope. And soon Nebuchadnezzar II stood at its gates, dreaming not of battle, but of splendor. And under his hand, the city blossomed once more, its temples restored, its walls shining in the sun, and gardens rose like mountains into the sky, watered by ingenious systems that whispered with falling water, creating a paradise in the desert that would later be known as the Hanging Gardens. Though whether they truly reached the heavens or simply lived in the minds of poets does not matter. For the dream was real, the idea was planted, and in the hush of moonlight the city became a wonder. And even as the world beyond pressed forward with iron and ambition, Babylon remained a place of beauty and mystery, a city where astrologers watched the night sky and mapped the movements of Venus and Mercury and Mars with the same quiet patience as their ancestors. And as they looked up, they did not feel fear or power, but calm. For the universe itself was a language, and the stars were words written by the divine. And as long as they watched and listened and wrote, the world would remain in harmony. And so they recorded eclipses, tracked conjunctions, studied omens, not for control, but for understanding. And the city beneath their feet pulsed softly with life. Markets, shrines, homes, halls, all woven together by time and trust. The same ancient rhythm humming through its streets as it had for thousands of years, unbroken, undisturbed,